The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees was founded in 1950 during the aftermath of Second World War to help millions of Europeans who had fled or lost their homes. Today, over 68 years later, the organization is still hard at work protecting and assisting refugees around the world.
101 countries are full members of the UNHCR, including Russia, the US, and China. Intergovernmental organizations are also part of the UNHCR, including the African Union and the European Union. Other entities are also part of the UNHCR, including UNESCO, WHO, the International Committee of the Red Cross, and the World Bank. Countries who have signed the 1951 Refugee Convention are automatic members of the UNHCR, as the convention outlines the rights of the refugee and legal action that needs to be taken by the state in order to protect them. Countries would want to join the UNHCR because the UNHCR attempts to solve the refugee crisis around the world. Its primary purpose is to ensure the rights of the refugees are being met. The UNHCR is governed by the UN General Assembly as well as the Economic and Social Council. The UNHCR has a High Commissioner who is the director of the UNHCR who reports annually to the General Assembly and the Economic and Social Council. It is hierarchical in structure as they have a High Commissioner and that person reports to various committees within the UN. In the picture above, that is the current High Commissioner of the UNHCR, and in the picture below, that is when the 1951 Refugee Convention was signed.
So how does it aim to resolve the problem it is trying to tackle? So first of all, the UNHCR and the country of origin and the international community would go through a process called go and see visits, education, legal aid, and family reunification. They have helped hundreds of thousands of people to return to their home to countries like Angola and Somalia. If the refugee cannot return to their home due to continued conflict or wars, the UNHCR would provide cultural orientation, language and vocation training, as well as access to education and employment so that they can resettle in another country. The integration within the host community is often a complex process which places considerable demands on both the individual and the receiving society. The UNHCR tries to do this by engaging in outreach activities to host community organizations. UNHCR's main way in ensuring refugees' rights and protections are to make sure that states are aware of and act on their obligations to protect and help refugees. However, it is not a supranational organization and cannot be considered as a replacement for government responsibilities, meaning that the UNHCR has no power at all over any other countries. However, other countries can support the UNHCR and give them power by placing sanctions upon other nations. A country can sanction other nation if it doesn't follow UNHCR guidelines. The main source of the power for the UNHCR is soft power by means of persuasion and some hard power, including the placement of economic sanctions on countries who do not follow UNHCR guidelines.
The mission of the UNHCR is, quote, to safeguard the rights and well-being of refugees, end quote. This was achieved in these examples as the majority of these refugees were assisted and safely relocated. UNHCR won their first Nobel Peace Prize for groundbreaking work within Europe after World War II, where they relocated millions of refugees who had fled Europe. During the Hungarian Revolution of 1956, where over 200,000 Hungarians fled to Austria to seek asylum, the UNHCR helped resettle them, and this event shaped the way humanitarian organizations would respond to future refugee crises. During the decolonization of Africa during the 1960s, when various African countries denounced their European colonizers and embraced independence, this caused 4 million refugees around the continent of Africa, and people fled their countries due to the independence and civil wars that arose. The UNHCR assisted a lot of these refugees. The first image are Jewish refugees who had escaped Germany. The second image is of the Hungarian Revolution, and the third image is during the 1960s when various African people fled their countries because of the civil and independence wars. The mission of the UNHCR is, quote, to safeguard the rights and well-being of refugees, end quote. This was not achieved in these examples, as refugees were left sleeping in freezing conditions due to mismanagement of funds sent back to their countries by nations who were signatories to the 1951 Refugee Convention and were discriminated against in a country who had accepted them. During the 1993 refugee crisis in Somalia, when thousands of Somali refugees fled to Kenya to escape their anarchic society, the UNHCR failed to assist. Somali refugees stated that the UNHCR did little to protect their humanitarian rights after Kenya had accepted them and were thereby discriminated against. Asylum seekers from Czech Republic, Poland, and Albania were turned away by Western European nations and were sent back to their countries, which violates the 1951 Convention of the Refugee written by the UNHCR, and the UNHCR failed to intervene in this matter. Thousands of refugees were left sleeping in freezing conditions in Greece. The UNHCR was accused of mismanaging a multi-million-dollar fund for refugees in Europe. The UNHCR was meant to use this money to help more people move from tents to heated conditions, but they failed to do that. The first picture is a picture taken of Somalis escaping their country, and the second picture is of Syrian refugees arriving in Greece. Individual state power has affected the failures and successes of the UNHCR heavily. An example of this is the UNHCR failure in Greece caused by the mismanagement of funds. The Greek government was also at fault here, as they used up some of the funds in an attempt to help save their decaying economy. To ensure this doesn't happen again, the UNHCR should not just hand the money over, but should have representatives who monitor the funds and ensure they go towards the cause. In this case, the cause was providing refugees with heated environments to stay in. During the Hungarian Revolution, Austria's quick acceptance of the various asylum seekers is an example of how individual state power led to a major success of the UNHCR, as Austria was very willing to accept Hungarian refugees who were escaping the Hungarian Revolution. Even though the majority of Western European nations are signatories to the 1951 Refugee Convention, they did not accept refugees from Poland, Austria, and the Czech Republic, and the UNHCR failed to intervene. The UNHCR could have tried to convince the Western European nations to accept these refugees, but most Western European nations are very powerful and would not likely be swayed by the UNHCR's plan.
In terms of IR theories, the fact that the UNHCR was created in the first place disproves the dependency theory, because UNHCR is a tool that the CC and PC states are using to help the refugees and from the CP and PP countries, as long as it's not against their own interest. While they have made huge success, which proves liberalism, there still are roughly 65.3 displaced people at the end of 2015. The lack of power has led to states ignoring or sending back the refugees due to their own interest, which caused the death of millions of refugees due to closed borders. This proves liberalism theory because powerful nations like China and some Western European states don't trust refugees from other states and often ignore the UNHCR and the convention they signed. Therefore, I think while the UNHCR tries to prove liberalism, it fails to protect and to help the majority of the refugees, which proves more of a realism than it proves the liberalism.